Hey guys, tonight we're drifting somewhere warmer, louder, and significantly more chaotic than your average medieval plague village. We're heading to Venezuela, a country that somehow managed to sit on one of the largest oil reserves on Earth and still end up with empty grocery shelves, worthless money, and neighbours who definitely know a guy. This is not a story about villains twirling moustaches or heroes riding in to fix everything. This is a story about good intentions, bad incentives, very bad math, and the kind of political decisions that feel reasonable at the time and catastrophic 5 minutes later. So before you get comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this sort of thing. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. For some reason, history always hits hardest at 2:37 a.m. Now go ahead and dim the lights, switch on a fan for that soft white noise and get comfortable. Maybe place your phone somewhere safe because you're about to mentally trip over several decades of economic chaos. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what it's like to live in a country that's technically rich but practically broke? What happens when oil money replaces common sense? Could you survive an economy where your paycheck loses value between breakfast and lunch? What does a normal day look like when gasoline is cheaper than bottled water, but neither one is easy to get? How do drug cartels quietly replace governments without ever officially announcing it? And at what point does everyone just shrug and start bartering shampoo? And now, congratulations, you've just woken up in Venezuela. The year is somewhere between the 1970s and the present. Time is blurry, your wallet feels lighter than it should, and someone nearby is explaining inflation using hand gestures. Good luck. You wake up in the early 20th century and Venezuela has just struck oil. Not a little oil, a ridiculous amount of oil. The kind of oil that makes foreign companies show up smiling, governments relax, and everyone assumes the good times are permanent. Suddenly, Venezuela doesn't need to worry about farming, manufacturing, or long-term planning. There's oil, and oil will handle it. You open your eyes and realize that beneath your feet, the ground isn't just dirt anymore, it's liquid money, bubbling away in vast unseen rivers. Yesterday, your biggest worry was a stubborn cow refusing to cooperate. Today, it's whether the Americans or the British will be the first to show up in your tiny town with shiny boots and promises of partnership. News travels fast. By lunchtime, everyone's a geologist, or at least pretending to be, and the local priest starts wondering if it's ethical to baptize babies with crude oil. Your world changes overnight, in that way only the 20th century can deliver. Quick, loud, and with paperwork you can't read. Suddenly, engineers with odd accents are drawing lines on maps, hiring workers, and promising wages that seem like a typo. Overnight, your neighbours trade their machetes for hard hats. The local shop stops selling ploughs and starts selling motor oil. Even the donkeys look confused. Yesterday, they were the main form of transportation. Today, people are betting on automobiles. At first it feels like a miracle. You walk through Caracas, and it's as if the city decided to have a growth spurt. There are new roads, actual paved roads, and buildings going up so fast the cement barely dries before someone's cousin opens a nightclub in it. Cars crowd the streets, honking, belching smoke, and breaking down in impressive ways. There's a sense that if you close your eyes and wish hard enough, Venezuela could be the next America, minus the snow. You're told by every newspaper and radio program that the future is secure. There are endless government announcements about progress, modernity, and a vision so dazzlingly optimistic it makes you squint. Ministers start using words like development and national destiny, which is code for don't worry about details, everything's under control. People stop worrying about crops or drought. If a shipment of rice doesn't come in, you can always import more. Oil money will pay for it. The country begins to fill up with things nobody knew they needed. Imported perfumes, French cheeses, Belgian chocolates, Scotch whiskey. Anything that isn't nailed down gets upgraded, and anything that is nailed down gets a fresh coat of paint and a government slogan. In the cities, refrigerators hum, radios crackle, and everyone suddenly owns a television. Out in the countryside, things move slower, but even there the air feels different, like everyone's holding their breath, waiting for their turn at the jackpot. Foreign oil executives set up shop in air-conditioned offices, while Venezuelan officials tour the world, shaking hands and collecting souvenirs. The press calls Venezuela the Saudi Arabia of the Americas, and people start believing it. Why plant a field when you can cash a check? Why save for the future when oil is the future? You might notice, in quieter moments, a few people muttering about what happens if the wells ever run dry. But mostly those voices are drowned out by the roar of traffic and the clink of glasses. Everything seems possible. Everything seems permanent. You don't see the dangers yet. Nobody does. That's for later. For now, you drift through a world where prosperity is measured by barrels, and happiness by how many imported goods you can fit in your new fridge. The whole country seems to lean back, basking in the golden glow of petrodollars, convinced just for a moment that nothing can go wrong. It's the calm before a storm, but you don't know that yet. You're just enjoying the ride, and for now, oil is solving everything. Let's talk about jobs. You used to grow food. Now you work near oil rigs, pipelines and refineries. The countryside empties as people flood cities chasing wages that feel miraculous compared to dirt farming. Food starts getting imported instead of grown. It seems efficient. It also quietly sets a trap. You start the day with soil under your fingernails and end it with oil on your boots. Yesterday, you knew every cow by name. Today, you can't even name all your co-workers, especially not the ones who shout at you in 3 different languages and have never seen a plant that didn't come in a salad. The landscape itself starts to look unfamiliar. The horizon that was once a patchwork of fields and wandering livestock is now dotted with metal towers, flaring orange against the sky, and the quiet thump of harvest is replaced by the ceaseless clanging of machinery. You notice your neighbours packing up. We're heading to Maracaibo, they tell you. There's real money in oil. No more praying for rain, just show up and get paid. Within weeks, whole villages empty out, leaving only grandmothers and stubborn goats behind. The cities swell with newcomers, farmers in borrowed boots, fishermen suddenly experts on gasoline, and herders with no sheep but plenty of ambition. Caracas, once a sleepy colonial city, starts sprouting concrete and glass like some over-caffeinated weed. Even the dogs look confused by the new traffic. Life changes fast. You swap your old hat for a helmet, and your hands, once used to planting seeds, now grip wrenches and levers. The work is hot, loud, and nothing at all like watching beans grow, but the pay? It's enough to make you forget all about muddy fields and crooked harvest moons. Or so you think. Suddenly there's cash for radios, bicycles, maybe even a refrigerator if you're lucky. Imported food fills the markets. Rice from the United States, apples from Chile, cans of mysterious European things you can't pronounce but buy anyway because why not? Your kids start requesting cornflakes instead of arepas, and you find yourself missing the days when you actually knew where your breakfast came from. The farms, meanwhile, get lonelier. Wheat and cornfields shrink. Orchards wither. There's nobody left to till the soil, mend the fences, or argue with the weather. If you do try to plant something, it feels quaint, like sewing your own clothes in an era of shopping malls. Why bother growing food when you can buy it with oil money? That's the logic, and for a while, it works. Shipments arrive full of things your grandparents never dreamed of. Grapes in December, chocolates shaped like bunnies, even frozen turkeys at Christmas. Everything you eat, wear and use is suddenly from somewhere else. It's progress, you're told, and it feels like it, right up until the trucks stop coming. There's a downside to this new life, but it sneaks in quietly, like mould in the back of a cabinet. Nobody worries about self-sufficiency until the port workers strike or a shipment gets delayed. That's when you notice If the boat doesn't dock, you don't eat. If the trucks stop, shelves go empty. The fields outside the city are still there, but mostly for decoration now, reminders of an older, slower way of life that's quietly fading away. It all feels efficient. It all feels modern. But beneath the hum of progress, you start to wonder if maybe, just maybe, you traded a hard life for a fragile one. Oil pays for everything, but oil can't be eaten, and it can't fix a tractor or plant a seed when everyone who knows how has moved away. And that, right there, is the quiet trap. You build a future on someone else's food, someone else's labour, and hope the oil keeps flowing forever. It's the kind of lesson you only learn when the pantry's empty, and the fields are full of nothing but weeds and memories. You notice something strange. Taxes barely matter anymore. The government isn't funded by citizens, it's funded by oil exports. Politicians no longer need to keep voters happy long term. They just need oil prices to stay high. Accountability begins to quietly slip out the back door. It starts quietly. You might not even notice at first. The streets are busy. The news is full of ribbon cuttings and shiny new programs, and somewhere, someone is always promising that this time, the future will finally arrive on schedule. But then you glance at your pay stub and realize the numbers under taxes are tiny, almost polite. You can't remember the last time a politician worried out loud about balancing the books, or asked you to tighten your belt for the good of the country. Why would they? Your contribution is a rounding error. The real money, the kind that pays for highways, hospitals, schools, and even the president's helicopter, doesn't come from you or your neighbours. It comes from the ocean of oil bubbling away under the ground. Every time oil prices tick up, the government gets a bonus. Every time they drop, everyone pretends not to see the cracks forming in the walls. This new reality is subtle but powerful. You start to realise that politicians have stopped selling you the future. They're selling you the present, one spending spree at a time. Why worry about the next election when you can announce another round of subsidies? Why build a tax base when oil provides a river of cash with no strings attached? As long as global oil prices cooperate, the treasury stays full. And if prices fall, well, there's always hope for a rebound, or at least a good excuse. You look around and notice how quickly this changes everything. Public works projects appear and disappear with the tides of the oil market. Some are grand, shiny new buildings, massive highways that gleam for a few years before the cracks show. Others are just rumours, schools half-built, clinics with no doctors, ambitious plans that fade as quickly as the funding. Budgets balloon, but oversight shrinks. You get used to politicians promising the moon and delivering, if you're lucky, a large rock with moon written on it in permanent marker. A strange thing happens to accountability. In a normal country, if the government wastes your money, you get mad, organise, maybe vote them out, or at least yell about it at the bakery. Here it's different. If the government wastes oil money, it feels like someone else's problem. The money didn't come from your pocket, so who cares if it slips out the back door? It's easy to ignore at first, but slowly you notice that nobody's really watching the store. Corruption grows quietly, like weeds in a vacant lot. The lines between personal fortune and public funds get blurry. A few people get very rich, very quickly. Most just shrug and learn not to ask too many questions. Meanwhile, you watch as leaders spend more time praying for high oil prices than planning for what happens if they fall. Instead of investing in schools, factories, or long-term growth, every crisis gets paid. The public has forgotten how to pay them, and the government has forgotten how to collect. It's an invisible shift, but a profound one. The country stops feeling like a team and starts feeling like a lottery. Everyone hopes for a lucky break, a sudden windfall, a new promise from on high. You start to realise that easy money isn't just easy to spend, it's dangerously easy to lose, and accountability once gone is almost impossible to get back. It's the 1950s and 60s, and Caracas feels rich. Skyscrapers go up, cars get bigger, everyone knows someone who knows someone in the oil industry. The middle class grows fast, confident, and extremely unprepared for what happens when the music stops. You wake up and the city feels like it's pulsing, glittering neon, American jazz on every corner, and the distant hum of jackhammers putting up another glass tower. The air is thick with ambition, gasoline, and perfume. Caracas, once a colonial backwater, is now a stage, and everyone's auditioning for the role of person who made it. High heels click on marble floors, waiters whirl by in white jackets. At night, the lights from the new skyscrapers make the whole valley glow like a disco ball for the Andes. Everywhere you turn, someone's got a cousin who just landed a job at PDVSA, the state oil company. That cousin has a new refrigerator, a Ford, and if he's lucky, a weekend place at the beach. There's a saying in Caracas, if you don't have a friend in oil, you don't have any friends at all. People trade stories of spontaneous raises and company parties that last until dawn. Someone's always flashing a watch or talking about their last trip to Miami, because Miami apparently is the new local mall. Let's talk about the cars. They're not just big, they're enormous. Detroit dreams on wheels, wide, finned, and gleaming under the tropical sun. It doesn't matter if the road is full of potholes, your Cadillac floats over them like a mattress. Traffic is a sign of progress, not dysfunction. Gas is so cheap it might as well be bottled and sold as cologne. You fill up for pocket change, tip the attendant, and still have enough left over for an ice cream and a magazine. Fashion? Caracas invents its own rules. Men wear imported suits and pretend to understand Italian tailoring. Women teeter on heels, hair teased up so high it scrapes the ceiling of the latest dance club. Music spills from every open window, boleros, mambo, and, for the modern crowd, American rock. House parties blur into work meetings, which blur into rooftop soirees, which blur into the next sunrise. It feels like nothing can go wrong. The middle class explodes, suddenly flush with money, optimism, and a sense that all this, appliances, imported cheese, afternoons spent gossiping in air-conditioned cafes, will last forever. Housewives start watching TV in black and white. Young professionals sip cocktails on patios. You feel modern, sophisticated, and very, very lucky. But you don't notice the cracks forming, at least, not yet. Nobody worries about what happens if the oil money slows down. Savings accounts are for pessimists. Everybody spends like there's a prize for running out of cash before payday. Import shops thrive, and nobody asks where the food actually comes from. The country buys first, asks questions later. Of course, some people aren't invited to the party. The poor neighbourhoods, the barrios, grow on the hillsides, quietly expanding while the city below keeps dancing. But most people in the new middle class are too busy to look up. Why ruin a good mood with complicated realities? And then there's the government. Officials cut ribbons, pose for magazine covers, and give speeches in front of every new building. They talk about El Milagro Venezolano, the Venezuelan miracle, like it's a permanent state of affairs, not a temporary winning streak. Even the president seems to walk with a little more swagger, certain that Caracas will soon outshine Paris, New York and Rio combined. For now, you float through a city that feels unstoppable. Every elevator ride is a chance to make a new connection. Every party is another reason to believe the best is yet to come. In the 1950s and 60s, Caracas isn't just having a good time, it's convinced the party will never end. And maybe, for a moment, you believe it too. You vote. That feels good. Venezuela becomes a democracy, and politicians promise prosperity for everyone. Social programs expand, subsidies multiply. Oil money pays for everything, and nobody asks what happens if oil prices fall. That question feels rude. You step into the bright Venezuelan sunshine and cast a ballot, maybe for the first time. The lines are long, but the mood is light. This is the age of new beginnings. Campaign posters are everywhere, smiling faces, bold promises, and slogans with more optimism than a lottery ticket salesman on payday. You hear words like reform, equality, modernization, and everyone's favourite, future. There's no cynicism yet. It's democracy's honeymoon phase, and everyone's invited, even if you're only here for the snacks. Politicians compete for your attention, not with fear or lectures, but with gifts. A new school here, a paved road there. If your town's missing a hospital, wait a month. It'll probably get 2. If you're tired of paying for bus fare, good news. Public transit is about to get a government-sized discount. Every campaign ad is a menu of benefits. Cheaper bread, free textbooks, subsidized milk, tax holidays, and a parade of new acronyms for social programs that roll out like red carpets. If there's a problem, the solution is simple. Just spend. And with oil money rolling in faster than anyone can spend it, why not? There's a new rhythm to daily life. Every week brings fresh announcements, new subsidies, new jobs, new promises. Children get free uniforms. Families get affordable housing. University education is within reach, and if you squint, it looks almost free. Nobody really asks where the money comes from, not out loud anyway. Oil pays for it all. The government beams with pride and signs another check. People adapt to this new reality quickly. You learn to expect help. You save less, spend more, and build your plans around the next round of government largesse. The middle class expands even further, swollen by state jobs, construction projects, and a general feeling that things are only going to get better. You tell yourself it's only fair. Why shouldn't everyone share in the wealth? There's a sense that Venezuela, after years of turmoil, has finally cracked the code. Democracy plus oil equals permanent prosperity. The government, meanwhile, acts like a newly minted millionaire. Each administration tries to outdo the last in generosity. There's a bit of competition, a political arms race of kindness, paid for in petrodollars. The idea of belt-tightening is almost taboo. Why be stingy when you can be beloved? It's not just about winning votes. It's about delivering on the promise that democracy here means never having to say no. But as the years pass, the habit of spending becomes hard to break. The country is hooked, not just on oil, but on the idea that the good times will last forever. Every sector expects support. Farmers want fertilizer subsidies, students want more scholarships, workers want wage increases. The national conversation becomes a chorus of requests, all set to the steady drumbeat of "we can afford it." Still, a few quiet voices whisper about structural reforms and diversification. They ask what happens if oil prices drop, or if the wells run dry. Most people nod, then change the subject. That's a problem for another day, preferably a day when the sun isn't shining and there isn't a sale at the appliance store. For now, you revel in the feeling of security and plenty. The government pays, the people cheer, and any thought of limits drifts quietly out the window. If you worry at all, you keep it to yourself, because in this golden age of democracy and spending, nobody wants to be the one who ruins the party by mentioning tomorrow. Let's talk about oil prices. They go up, everyone cheers, then they go down. Suddenly the math doesn't work anymore. The government borrows money, assuming oil will rebound soon. It doesn't. Debt quietly piles up like dishes no one wants to wash. You're standing in line for groceries again, and everyone is talking about oil. Not the stuff that comes in a little glass bottle for frying plantains, but the kind that bubbles up from the ground and supposedly makes the country rich. In Venezuela, the price of oil isn't just a number, it's the country's mood ring. When the price is high, people buy new TVs, the president goes on television to announce a plan national, and you might even see a new statue pop up in a city square. When oil prices drop, the only thing being unveiled is another government speech, usually about external factors and temporary adjustments. There's a rhythm to it. You feel it in your bones, even if you don't follow the markets. Oil up, time to celebrate. New subsidies, new construction, new jobs. The city sparkles. The poor get food baskets, the middle class gets another credit card, and politicians get a fresh excuse to host a parade. Life gets a little easier. Maybe you finally fix that leaky roof or buy an air conditioner to survive the heat. Maybe you even plan a vacation, just this once, you say. After all, this oil bonanza can't last forever, can it? But then, as surely as sunrise follows sunset, the prices fall. The headlines change from triumph to worry. There's no parade this time. You start hearing words like austerity, restructuring, and tightening our belts. The government's math, which made perfect sense at $100 a barrel, suddenly looks like something your cousin wrote on a napkin after 3 beers. And just like that, the magic trick of prosperity starts to unravel. The country still has bills to pay, big ones. Projects that began during the good times need to be finished. Public workers expect their salaries, and nobody, absolutely nobody, wants to be the first to mention cutting back. So the government borrows and borrows. After all, the logic goes, oil prices will rebound soon. They always do, right? Just a temporary dip, a little storm before the next sunrise. But sometimes the rebound doesn't come on schedule. Sometimes the world changes and the price stays stubbornly low. That's when things get awkward. The country keeps spending as if nothing's wrong. But behind the scenes, IOUs multiply in silent stacks, promises written in invisible ink. You start to notice the signs. New construction slows, then halts. Government offices take a little longer to process paperwork. Someone's cousin's best friend gets laid off at the ministry. Supermarkets quietly swap imported goods for local knockoffs. Public services grow thinner, but nobody wants to admit it's a problem yet. Politicians go on television with big smiles, promising better days ahead, as if charm alone can move the global oil market. Maybe, you think, if everyone claps hard enough, the prices will go back up. Meanwhile, debt is like those dirty dishes piling up in the sink. Everyone sees them, everyone knows they're there, but somehow nobody ever gets around to cleaning up. Instead, you just buy more plates. The government floats more bonds, calls in more loans, and quietly hopes for a miracle. People adapt in the way they always do, by lowering their expectations and pretending everything is fine until, quite suddenly, it's not. Eventually, when the debt can't be ignored, someone will have to pick up the sponge. But for now, you shrug, roll with the ups and downs, and hope that the next oil boom is just around the corner. After all, this is Venezuela, the land of eternal optimism, big dreams, and a national budget tied to the wildest ride on earth. You wake up poorer than yesterday. Inflation rises. Services decline. The country realizes it built its entire economy on one product and forgot to diversify. This is when anxiety replaces optimism and trust in institutions begins to crack. It sneaks up on you at first, subtle changes in the daily rhythm. You go to the bakery and the price of bread has gone up again. By the afternoon it's higher still. Your friend who works at the bus station complains that the cost of spare parts is rising faster than the buses can break down. The government keeps insisting everything is under control, but your wallet disagrees. At family gatherings, people begin to reminisce about the good years as if they happened decades ago, even though you're pretty sure they were just last summer. It's the 1980s in Venezuela, and you're living through an era that future historians will call the beginning of the long, slow headache. The oil price rollercoaster has slammed down, hard, and the country's financial hangover is just beginning. Subsidies get trimmed, public works slow to a crawl. Every new government program comes with a little less sparkle, a little more fine print. The music in Caracas clubs is still loud, but the laughter feels thinner. Even the traffic jams seem less optimistic. You find yourself standing in lines for things you didn't even know could run out. Milk, sugar, diapers, matches. Sometimes after hours of waiting, the item disappears just before your turn. You develop a sixth sense for when shelves are about to empty, an ancient primal instinct not seen since the days of foraging for wild fruit. "No hay" becomes the phrase of the decade. There isn't any. You hear it everywhere. Meanwhile, the currency starts shrinking in your hand. Every paycheck buys less than the last. Zeros multiply on price tags until the numbers are so big they feel like a prank. You see news anchors trying to say inflation with a straight face while pretending the weather is still the biggest story. Your grandmother starts hiding believers under the mattress, the ultimate act of optimism in a world where money evaporates faster than rain on hot concrete. Trust begins to erode, slowly, and then all at once. The political speeches sound familiar, but the crowds are smaller, the applause more hesitant. Promises echo, but nobody expects them to land. Corruption isn't whispered about anymore. It's shrugged at, like potholes and delayed buses. Everyone knows someone who can get a permit, fix a passport, or find imported coffee under the table. Institutions that once seemed permanent, schools, hospitals, banks, now look a little unsteady, like chairs with one leg shorter than the rest. In the countryside, the effects are harsher. Those who stay behind to farm discover that imported food isn't so cheap anymore, and there's no longer much support for ploughs or seeds. In the cities, the new middle class, so recently secure, so recently enthusiastic about imported cheese, starts quietly worrying about how to keep the lights on and the fridge cold. What nobody wants to admit, but everyone quietly suspects, is that the prosperity of the past decade wasn't built to last. Nobody diversified. Nobody planned for a rainy day, or more accurately, a long stretch of dry, oilless ones. When the money was rolling in, it felt rude to ask what would happen if it stopped. Now it's stopped, and everyone's too polite to talk about why. So you do what Venezuelans have always done. You adapt. You stretch the soup, mend the clothes, find creative new uses for yesterday's leftovers. But there's a new background hum in the city, a gentle buzz of worry that doesn't go away when you turn off the lights. And as the 1980s march on, optimism slips out the back door, and you realise the bill for the last big party has finally come due. It's 1989. Prices jump overnight. Public transport gets more expensive. You go outside and suddenly the country explodes into riots. Looting spreads. The military responds. Hundreds die. This is the moment many Venezuelans realize the system isn't just flawed, it's fragile. You wake up and something in the air feels off. Maybe it's the news on the radio, a new round of adjustments and economic reforms. Maybe it's the way your neighbour's voice catches when she mentions the price of rice. Or maybe it's just the bus fare, which yesterday was affordable and today feels like it requires a small loan. Whatever it is, the city hums with a nervous energy, the kind you feel before a thunderstorm. The changes seem simple at first. The government, desperate to fix its ballooning debt and empty coffers, announces an end to fuel subsidies and hikes the price of gasoline. Bus drivers pass the cost along to riders. What was once a small inconvenience is now a punch to the gut for workers, students, and everyone who relies on public transport to get anywhere. The reaction is immediate. People crowd the streets, shouting at the sky and each other, trying to make sense of how quickly life got harder. You step outside to the smell of hot pavement and tension. In Caracas, protests spark and spread like fire on dry grass. It's not just about the buses or the cost of food. It's about everything. Years of rising prices, shrinking wages, and silent resentment bubble up all at once. Crowds gather at bus stops, then at city squares. The anger is sharp, unfiltered, and within hours unstoppable. Then, like a bad dream, the city transforms. Store windows shatter. Shelves are emptied in minutes. Some people loot out of anger, some out of need. and some just because it's suddenly possible. Shoes, televisions, flour, everything becomes fair game. You hear the distant wail of sirens, then see the smoke rising from the hills. News spreads fast, faster than the government can react. The president appears on television looking stunned and defensive, promising order and calm, but the words dissolve in the roar of the crowd. You try to call relatives, nobody answers. The streets you know so well are suddenly alien, crowded with people who look just as bewildered as you feel. The sound of breaking glass echoes from downtown to the barrios. Some people stand in their doorways, unsure whether to join in or lock up. Others drag old mattresses into the street, setting up makeshift barricades. For a moment it feels like anything could happen, and then the military arrives. Tanks roll in, soldiers fan out, and curfews snap into place. But control is a mirage. The police are overwhelmed, the army is outnumbered. Violence flashes everywhere, shots fired, people running, tear gas curling through the alleys. By nightfall, the city is a patchwork of light and shadow. A few neighbourhoods eerily quiet, others still boiling over. Over the next few days, the numbers come in. The government tries to minimise the tragedy, but everyone knows someone who didn't come home. Hundreds are dead, thousands wounded or arrested. Some neighbourhoods carry the scars for years, burned out shops, broken windows, and memories nobody can quite talk about. This is the moment when the illusion of stability shatters. No amount of oil money, no grand promises or subsidies can glue it back together overnight. For the first time, it's obvious. The system isn't just struggling, it's on the edge. Overnight, you see it everywhere, in the nervous jokes at the bakery, the wary glances in the subway, the way people count their change before spending a bolivar. After Caracazo, life never feels quite as certain. The old optimism is gone. You carry a new understanding. The line between calm and chaos is thinner than you ever imagined. You hear about a military officer with a red beret and a talent for speeches. He attempts a coup, fails, goes to prison, then becomes famous anyway. Chavez promises dignity, fairness, and revenge against corrupt elites. People listen because they're tired. You don't just hear about Hugo Chavez, you see him everywhere. On the news, in the newspaper, plastered on murals in downtown Caracas. Even in conversation, he pops up like an unpaid bill. He's got a booming voice, a flair for drama, and the uncanny ability to make you feel like he's talking directly to you. Even when you're at the back of a sweaty crowd or stuck behind a broken TV with only static for company. Chavez arrives at the end of a very long party, a crash no one wants to clean up, when the country is exhausted from inflation, corruption, and the slow-motion car wreck that was the late 80s. It starts with a bang, or more precisely a coup attempt in 1992. You wake up one February morning to hear tanks rumbling on the streets, and a young officer on TV saying "for now," the kind of phrase that sticks in your mind long after breakfast. Chavez's coup fails. He's arrested, mugshots splashed across every front page, but instead of fading away, he somehow gets larger. "Pura hora," he says, and it becomes the unofficial slogan for everyone who's ever muttered maybe next time at a broken vending machine. In prison, he's not forgotten. If anything, he grows more famous. The country's problems don't go away. Politicians squabble, money evaporates, and no one seems to know how to fix the mess. People are restless, but nobody trusts the usual suspects. Chavez, on the other hand, is something new, a little reckless, a lot unpredictable, and with a talent for making speeches sound like battle cries and bedtime stories all at once. You hear neighbours whisper about him in lines for bread. Taxi drivers quote his words with a mixture of hope and mischief. Even your aunt, who swore off politics years ago, suddenly wants to know more about this soldier with the eyes. Chavez finally emerges from prison, not as a broken man, but as a celebrity. He's on television constantly, grinning, waving, declaring that he'll bring justice for the poor and a reckoning for the rich. He doesn't wear a suit. He wears a red beret, military fatigues, and sometimes, in moments of real drama, a Venezuelan flag draped across his shoulders. He calls out corrupt elites by name. He promises dignity, pride, and a country run for the people, not the oligarchy. The crowd eats it up. What's odd is how quickly he moves from political outlaw to the centre of attention. The establishment dismisses him as a nuisance, a footnote, but everywhere else, he's a main character, the subject of street art, the topic of dinner table arguments, the voice booming out of battered radios in every corner shop. For a country used to being let down, Chavez is loud, different, and willing to break the script. The more people listen, the more the old ways seem tired and ridiculous. It's not just that Chavez blames the corrupt, it's that he makes it sound like you, personally, can be part of the fix. He laughs on camera, gets teary-eyed in speeches, calls up the ghosts of Simon Bolivar and promises a new dawn. Sometimes it feels like you're in a telenovela with military uniforms, and for once the plot is moving. Of course, not everyone trusts him. Some say he's dangerous, a demagogue, a wild card. But by the late 90s, tired is more powerful than afraid. The country is ready to gamble on something new, something different, maybe even something loud. And Hugo Chavez, with his red beret and talent for theatre, is more than ready to fill that role. Chavez gets elected. You notice oil prices are high again. Perfect timing. The government expands social programs massively. Poverty drops. Support skyrockets. Oil money floods everything, and Chavez becomes the system instead of fixing it. You wake up in a Venezuela where everything feels new, or at least rebranded. There's Chavez on TV, flashing that famous grin, promising a Bolivarian revolution and a country that finally belongs to its people. Oil prices are soaring, the treasury is overflowing, and suddenly, even your neighbour's cousin, who's always broke, can afford a new refrigerator and a parrot named after a soccer player. The mood is infectious. People joke that the only thing falling from the sky is money, not rain. Chavez moves quickly, as if he's worried the oil bonanza will evaporate if he blinks. New social missions appear with dramatic names: Misión Barrio Adentro, Misión Mercal, Misión Robinson. There's a mission for doctors, a mission for food, a mission for teaching adults to read, and, if you wait long enough, probably a mission for finding lost flip-flops. Free clinics open in poor neighbourhoods, staffed by Cuban doctors. Grocery stores sell subsidised rice, milk, and chicken for pocket change. Brand new houses pop up on the outskirts of cities, painted in cheery government-approved colours that seem to resist dirt but not humidity. Everywhere you look, the country feels like a TV infomercial. But wait, there's more. Except instead of a second set of steak knives, you're getting discount cooking oil and a free eye exam. Children show up to class with free textbooks and new uniforms. Elderly people, who once lined up for hours at underfunded hospitals, suddenly have a hotline just for them. The phrase inclusion is everywhere, usually followed by a cheerful parade and another speech. For the first time in a long time, you see hope on people's faces. The barrios seem brighter. Poverty stats drop. Lines for state jobs stretch around the block, and you learn that knowing someone at the ministry is now as valuable as winning the lottery. Chavez doesn't just promise change, he delivers it, wrapped in flags and televised for maximum effect. His Sunday TV show, A lo Presidente, becomes a weekly ritual. You tune in to watch him sing, cook, scold his ministers, and occasionally nationalise entire industries with a single wave of the hand. But beneath the music and confetti, something subtle shifts. Instead of reforming broken institutions, Chavez builds new ones alongside the old, sometimes overlapping, sometimes replacing, always loyal to him. Ministries and missions sprout like mushrooms after a summer rain. The paperwork triples, the slogans multiply, And suddenly, even routine tasks require navigating a maze of acronyms. If you complain, there's a hotline for that too, just don't expect anyone to answer. You start to notice that the opposition, the old political parties, skeptical journalists, grumpy economists, are either ignored or ridiculed. Dissent is out of fashion. Criticism is dismissed as sabotage. The people become whoever supports the revolution, and the oligarchy is everyone else. Oil money masks the inefficiencies. As long as the cash keeps coming, nobody asks hard questions. After all, why fix the leaky faucet when you can just build a new bathroom and give it away for free? Soon, Chavez himself becomes the system. Government programs, public events, even baseball games can't start without a nod to the Comandante. The country feels like it runs on charisma, petroleum, and nationalized enthusiasm. For a while, it works. Poverty really does fall, and the world points to Venezuela as proof that miracles are possible if you have enough oil. You get used to the speeches, the missions, the sense of living in history's spotlight. But quietly, in the corners of conversations and the flicker of power outages, you wonder how long the oil and the miracle will last. For now, though, socialism is easy when someone else is paying the bill. Let's talk about nationalization. Oil, electricity, food production, steel. More and more industries move under government control. Efficiency drops. Loyalty matters more than competence. But oil is still paying the bills, so problems stay hidden. It starts quietly, with an announcement on TV. The president, chest out, voice booming, declares that Venezuela belongs to the people, and from now on, so does the oil company. The next day, it's the electricity grid, then the steel mills, then the food processing plants. Soon, the only things not nationalized are your grandma's soup recipe and the family cat, and both are under review. You watch the parade of new state managers, some in suits, some in jumpsuits, all smiling nervously. Most are appointed because they know someone important, or at least know someone who knows someone. There's a new kind of job security, political loyalty. If you have the right slogan on your bumper sticker, you're promoted. If you wear the wrong colour shirt to work, suddenly you're reassigned to the Ministry of Miscellaneous Affairs, a department whose main responsibility is holding meetings about having meetings. At first, nothing seems to change. After all, the lights are still on, the oil still pumps, the food still arrives, if a little more slowly than before. But you start to notice oddities. Maybe the milk tastes a little off, or the bread arrives 3 days late, or the bus driver stops halfway to work because the fuel shipment never showed up. Still, oil money covers a multitude of sins. When something breaks, the government throws cash at the problem until it sort of works, or at least looks presentable for the cameras. Efficiency is no longer the goal, survival and loyalty are. Meetings multiply, paperwork breeds in filing cabinets, and everyone learns the art of looking busy. You hear stories of entire departments created just to stamp forms that nobody reads. Your cousin gets a job inspecting potatoes, despite being allergic to carbohydrates and knowing nothing about agriculture. The phrase, "it's not my problem," becomes the unofficial motto of every office. Meanwhile, the old managers, the ones who knew how things ran, slowly disappear. Some retire early, some move abroad, and some just learn to keep their heads down. The new bosses arrive with big ideas, small experience, and a dedication to slogans that rivals their knowledge of actual engineering. Production drops, but the speeches get longer. If a factory fails, it's always the fault of external sabotage or bad apples, never the new policies. For a while, oil prices stay high and the money keeps flowing. Every time a problem emerges, the government promises a relaunch, a great leap forward, or if nothing else, a new logo and a fresh coat of paint. You might wait a little longer for your electricity, but there's always an explanation. Sometimes it's the weather, sometimes it's an international conspiracy, sometimes it's just Tuesday. You start to notice that the best way to get anything done is to know someone on the inside. Official channels slow to a crawl, but a quick phone call to the right cousin can still move mountains, or at least fix your leaking roof. Bribery and favours are just part of the new normal, as common as morning coffee. The big irony: for a while, nobody really minds. As long as the oil money holds out, the state keeps spending, and the party doesn't stop. You roll your eyes, make jokes, and shrug off delays. But beneath the surface, a quiet rot is spreading, hidden by petrodollars and patriotic speeches. And all the while, the country becomes less a place that produces things, and more a place that just distributes oil wealth, slowly, unevenly, and increasingly on the basis of who you know, not what you can do. For now, that's enough. But you sense, if only in the flicker of a light bulb or the empty shelf at the market, that the old systems are breaking just out of sight. You start seeing more cash. The government prints money to cover gaps. Inflation rises slowly, then faster. Prices climb. Wages don't. People adapt by shrugging and spending immediately before money loses value again. It sneaks into your life almost innocently. You go to the bank and walk out with a stack of bills so thick you need a rubber band, and soon, too. The government, faced with too many expenses and not enough oil revenue, starts running the printing presses like a bakery with unlimited flour. At first, nobody really complains. Who could object to having more money? Your wallet feels heavier. The local jokes start. We're all millionaires now, if only for a day. The signs are subtle at first. You notice that the price of your morning coffee rises a few believers every week. The grocer marks up canned goods a little higher each visit, but everyone shrugs. It's just the cost of progress, or maybe a little adjustment. You start spending your cash as soon as you get it, and so does everyone else. Money becomes a hot potato, dangerous to hold, best passed on quickly. Salaries are paid on Friday and spent by Saturday. By Monday, those same bills have lost their flavour, like chewing gum after the first few minutes. Shops update prices so often that chalkboards become more valuable than inventory. Nobody prints menus anymore, they just call them out, or write them in pencil. Store clerks become part-time comedians, joking that they'll accept your money, but only if you pay before they finish ringing you up. Some people start buying anything that will hold value: rice, toilet paper, soap, even chocolate. You begin to understand the phrase hedge against inflation, but instead of stocks and bonds, you're stockpiling sugar and extra laundry detergent. Meanwhile, the government insists that this is temporary. They call it liquidity. They blame smugglers, speculators, foreign conspiracies, anyone but the men standing by the printing press. On TV, the president assures you that inflation is under control. The finance minister nods in the background, but you notice he's clutching a calculator like a life preserver. You try to keep up. You develop new survival skills. Mental arithmetic becomes second nature. How much will this cost in a week? If I don't buy now, will I be able to afford it tomorrow? Landlords start charging rent in groceries or US dollars if they can. Some people barter, others invent imaginary friend discounts at the checkout. Your aunt pays the plumber with half a roast chicken and a promise to help find spare parts for his car. Wages can't keep up. You get a raise, but the excitement fades when you see what it buys. People stop talking about salaries in monthly terms. It's all about how much you can buy this week, or even today. The phrase real value enters daily conversation. You spend your evenings on the phone, swapping tips with friends about where to find the best deals or the shortest lines. You look at the pile of bills in your kitchen drawer, money that was worth something last month and now feels like colourful confetti. Some people turn their old bills into origami, Christmas ornaments, or papier-mâché art projects. A few clever souls launch businesses selling wallets that can actually hold 100 bills at a time. Still, daily life goes on. You laugh, because the alternative is crying. You learn to sprint through the marketplace, to spend before thinking, to buy eggs before the price hatches a new zero. And you start to realize printing money always feels harmless at first, right up until it isn't. Hugo Chavez dies in 2013. Nicolas Maduro takes over. Oil prices collapse soon after. The economy was never prepared for this moment. Without oil money, the entire system starts folding in on itself. It feels abrupt, but also somehow inevitable. One day, you wake up and the entire country is watching television. The president is gone. Chavez, the comandante, the human megaphone, the man who made the news every day, isn't coming back. The streets fill with mourners in red shirts. Every channel plays montages of speeches, of him singing, of people crying in the rain. Whether you loved him or just got used to the volume, there's no denying something huge has ended. His chosen successor, Nicolas Maduro, steps in. Maduro is tall, mustachioed and earnest, but where Chavez was pure charisma, Maduro always looks slightly uncomfortable, like a substitute teacher who showed up for class with the wrong lesson plan. He promises continuity. He promises revolution, progress, and more of everything. But the spell has already begun to wear off. Then, as if the universe itself wants to make things interesting, oil prices nosedive. In Venezuela, this is the equivalent of your winning lottery ticket bursting into flames while you're still standing in line for your prize. The country's budget, built entirely on a foundation of petrodollars and magical thinking, begins to crack. Programs that once handed out food, appliances and hope start to stutter. The government's speeches stay loud, but the music underneath gets slower, sadder, a little more desperate. You see it first at the supermarket. Shelves thin out. Your neighbour, who used to buy cheese in bulk, now guards a single pack-like treasure. Medicine vanishes. Car parts disappear. Everyone becomes an expert at making do with less. Patching tyres, boiling herbs, fixing shoes with glue and luck. People line up for hours just to buy cornmeal or toothpaste, swapping rumours about which stores have flour, which pharmacies have aspirin. The state tries to keep up appearances. Officials insist the shortages are just a hiccup. There are always explanations: sabotage, international conspiracies, greedy business owners, anything but the obvious fact that the money's run out and nothing was built to last without it. You watch as the government prints new bills with more zeros, changes the currency, invents new slogans. The numbers get bigger, your groceries get smaller. At work, things are just as strange. Offices run out of supplies. No paper, no ink, sometimes no power. State jobs, once prized, become a burden. Salaries evaporate in your pocket. Some people stop showing up. Others show up only to nap or quietly trade soap for cigarettes. Private businesses close, then reopen as street stalls or WhatsApp side hustles. The real economy goes underground, and the official economy becomes a game of make-believe. Meanwhile, the government talks about resistance, dignity, and the need to tighten belts. But the people doing the tightening are always the same. Maduro appears on TV, eating an empanada in a bakery surrounded by food no one else can find. His speeches sound familiar, but the magic is gone. You realize that hope, like oil, can run dry, and that the country built to run on both suddenly has neither. You adapt because you have to. You share with neighbours, you barter, you joke in the long lines. But a quiet panic sets in, something deeper than hardship, a suspicion that the old rules don't work and the new ones are being made up as you go. The system, once loud and confident, now rattles like an empty tin can. And for the first time you realise no one, not even the people in charge, knows what happens next. You check prices in the morning. By afternoon, they've doubled. Your salary becomes meaningless. Savings vanish. People carry stacks of cash worth less than the bag holding them. The believer turns into a suggestion rather than a currency. It's not so much that money disappears, but that it seems to dissolve right in your hands. You wake up, glance at your wallet, and realize it's physically heavier, but spiritually lighter, full of believers that feel like monopoly money but can't buy even a fake hotel on Boardwalk. Every trip to the market is an expedition. You bring a backpack, or if you're feeling optimistic, a duffel bag. The street vendors look at your fistful of bills and sigh, as if you've handed them a pile of expired coupons. You notice everyone shops with urgency now. Prices aren't just numbers, they're rumours, whispered in checkout lines and confirmed by the speed with which they change. A loaf of bread costs one thing at breakfast, something else by dinner. You learn not to ask, how much, but how much right now. Supermarkets update prices on whiteboards, chalkboards, sticky notes, and sometimes just by crossing out the old price and scribbling a new one every few hours, payday loses all meaning. The company deposits your salary and it's a mad dash. First to the ATM, then to the store, then to your family to divide the loot before it melts into thin air. Sometimes your salary is deposited late, and by the time you receive it, it won't cover a dozen eggs, never mind the rest of the week. Old-timers tell stories about saving money, but for your generation, savings are just stories, fables for children, like unicorns or stable rent. People start improvising. Purses are replaced by grocery bags, pockets by backpacks. Some just bring cash in whatever container is closest, a shoebox, a tote, a plastic bag with a hole. The only time you see a suitcase full of cash is at the bank, and nobody's going on vacation. Counting cash becomes a group activity. Your family gathers in the living room, sorting bills like poker chips, laughing at the absurdity because if you don't laugh, you'll cry. Some get creative. Children craft paper boats out of worthless notes. Bored adults make collages or garlands. The old joke, it costs more to print the money than it's worth, isn't even a joke anymore. Wages don't keep up, not even close. Every raise is outdated before it's announced. You stop checking your bank balance because it's mostly just a string of numbers with no relation to real life. The only people who do well are those who earn in dollars, or those who know someone abroad who sends them. Dollars become mythical, magical. Rumour has it that some people keep them tucked into socks, books, even old peanut butter jars, hidden from sight like pirate treasure. Meanwhile, the government tries to control the chaos by printing bigger bills, 5 zeros, then 6, then lopping off a few and starting over. New bills come in new colours, but it's the same story. They urge you to have faith in the believer, but even the official exchange rate changes more often than the weather. Black market rates are everyone's favourite topic, right after where to find toilet paper. You adapt. You live in the present. You spend fast, eat fast, pay fast. You learn to barter, soap for rice, medicine for flour, a haircut for a chicken. You become a master of triage, deciding what you need now versus what you might not find tomorrow. And as the zeros multiply and the believer turns into little more than colourful confetti, you realise money isn't real unless you can use it, and in hyperinflation, reality changes every hour. Let's talk about shopping. Shelves are empty, lines are long, basic items become rare. You wait hours for flour, rice, or toilet paper. The black market thrives because it's the only thing functioning normally. You start your day with a list: rice, beans, cooking oil, toilet paper. It's optimistic, ambitious even. Armed with a shopping bag, some cash, and perhaps a little hope, you head to the supermarket. By now, you know to leave early, before the sun and before everyone else in your neighbourhood. You join a line that already snakes around the block. It's hard to tell what people are even waiting for. Sometimes you find out only when you reach the door. Sometimes you never find out at all. Inside, the shelves are a study in minimalism. The bread aisle has a single lonely loaf, the dairy case a few mismatched bottles of milk, and the meat counter, well, you'd have better luck finding a unicorn than chicken thighs. If you spot toilet paper, you text your cousin immediately, as if you've stumbled upon buried treasure. People are polite mostly, but there's a silent tension in the air, the kind that comes from living in a perpetual game of musical chairs where the music always stops too soon. It's not just supermarkets. Pharmacies, hardware stores, gas stations, all are part of the same scavenger hunt. You develop a network of friends and relatives, swapping tips and rumours. Someone's brother hears there's flour at a bakery on the other side of town. Someone else's aunt knows a guy who knows a guy with powdered milk. The city becomes a web of whispered addresses and secret handshakes, a treasure map without any X to mark the spot. You learn patience. Waiting becomes a national sport practiced by everyone from toddlers to grandmothers. In line, people trade stories, snacks, sometimes even small favours. You make friends with the people in front and behind, if only because you're all trapped in the same slow-motion parade. Sometimes you reach the front and there's nothing left. You sigh, go home, and start again tomorrow. Meanwhile, the black market thrives. It doesn't sleep or take holidays. There's always someone selling what you need, at a price. Flour, rice, medicine, diapers. The selection is amazing if you can afford it. Dollars are preferred, but the right connection is just as good. You learn to negotiate, to spot fakes, to count change twice. The police look the other way. After all, even they have families to feed. The government, of course, announces new shipments and solutions on TV. There are graphs and slogans, ministers touring empty warehouses and smiling for the cameras. But you know better. Solutions announced in the morning rarely survive past lunchtime. Instead, you trust the network, friends, family, neighbours, WhatsApp groups with names like hunting for toilet paper. Scarcity brings out strange behaviours. You buy things you don't need just in case. You trade sugar for soap, pasta for painkillers, a bar of chocolate for a little peace of mind. Children get creative, inventing games with bottle caps and cardboard. Adults get creative too, turning beans into cake and rice into everything else. You celebrate small victories, a bag of flour, a carton of eggs, a single avocado. You discover resilience in unexpected places. People laugh, share, complain, and keep going. No matter how empty the shelves or how long the line, there's always someone with a joke, a snack, or a borrowed umbrella for the rain. The black market flourishes because deep down, Venezuelans understand. Survival is about finding a way, not following the rules. And in the end, you realize shopping is no longer about what you want, but what you can find. The real currency isn't cash. It's resourcefulness, patience, and the quiet determination to stand in line again tomorrow. As the state weakens, criminals step in. Gangs control neighborhoods. Police are underpaid and overwhelmed. Safety becomes personal, informal, and unreliable. You learn which streets to avoid and when not to leave the house. It creeps up on you slowly. Maybe you hear it first from a neighbour, a story about a robbery, a friend who was mugged, a cousin whose motorcycle disappeared overnight. Maybe you notice the police patrols thinning out, sirens replaced by silence. You start reading between the lines of every conversation. The old rules, be home by dark, avoid that one alley, are now joined by a new, ever-changing set. Don't wear flashy shoes. Don't answer unknown calls. Never carry more than you can lose. You adjust. Everyone does. A routine trip to the corner store becomes a strategic operation. You choose your route carefully, watching for faces you recognize, scanning doorways and rooftops. Sometimes the streets feel deserted. Sometimes they're crowded, but in a way that makes you more nervous, not less. Gangs run certain blocks now, their rules enforced more efficiently than any law on the books. If you live there, you know who to greet and who to avoid. If you're just passing through, you don't linger. Police presence is a memory. The officers that remain are tired, underpaid, and sometimes just as nervous as you are. Some are honest, doing their best in impossible circumstances. Others are creative, supplementing their salaries with fees, or looking the other way at the right moment. You stop expecting help to arrive when you need it. Calling the authorities is like tossing a message in a bottle. Maybe it reaches someone, maybe it floats away. In this new world, safety is a patchwork quilt. Families organise informal neighbourhood watches. Someone's grandfather, a retired security guard, volunteers for night duty, armed with a whistle and a flashlight. Neighbours whisper warnings and keep a lookout. If your car breaks down after dark, you don't wait for help. You push, run, or bribe a passing motorcyclist for a ride home. The government issues statements about public safety. The only thing they protect is their press conferences. You hear about protection fees, small businesses paying local gangs for peace and quiet, not as a choice, but as a necessity. If you can't pay, you close early, board up the windows, and hope for the best. Some streets, once lively with kids playing soccer, are now empty by sundown. Streetlights go out and aren't replaced. You get used to darkness, to walking quickly, to always glancing over your shoulder. School becomes another lesson in survival. Children learn which classmates are safe to visit and which aren't. Parents text constantly, tracking each other's movements. "Did you get home yet?" becomes as common as "how are you?" You become fluent in a new kind of small talk, comparing near misses and lucky escapes, swapping advice on the safest hours to shop or the best hiding spots for your phone. Amid all this, people find strange ways to adapt. Markets open earlier, closing at noon. Churches fill up on weeknights, not just for faith, but for the safety in numbers. The barber down the street learns to cut hair twice as fast. Weddings and birthdays are smaller, held in living rooms with the curtains drawn. Still, life goes on. People laugh, fall in love, invent new routines. The city's rhythm changes, quieter but no less stubborn. You trade information as much as you trade goods. The stories you used to hear in secret become the background hum of daily life. In the end, you become your own security system. Cautious, alert, quietly hoping for better days. And you realize the truth in every whispered warning. When the state steps back, someone, or something, always fills the space it leaves behind. You live between Colombia and the Caribbean. Cocaine routes shift. Corruption makes movement easy. Venezuela becomes a transit hub, quietly and efficiently. The government denies it. Everyone else notices. It starts with stories, little rumours that filter in from the borders. A truck stopped with suspicious cargo. A fishing boat carrying more than just snapper and shrimp. A cousin's friend's neighbour suddenly buying a new SUV. No questions asked. You hear about airstrips in the middle of nowhere, roads that seem to get repaired overnight in areas where nobody officially lives. Everyone knows, but nobody says it out loud. Venezuela is now the world's fastest growing pit stop for cocaine en route from Colombia to, well, everywhere else. Geography does the country no favours. You're sandwiched between the world's largest cocaine producer and some of the world's hungriest markets. The Caribbean coast, with its sleepy beaches and mangrove swamps, suddenly looks less like a paradise and more like a launch pad. Small planes buzz in and out after midnight. Fishing boats loaded with everything but fish slip away before dawn. Sometimes you wonder if even the pelicans are in on the game. The transformation is so smooth, so incremental, that you almost don't notice at first. But you start seeing the signs. There are new faces at the gas stations near the border, men with too much cash, too many bodyguards, and sunglasses that never come off, even at night. You hear of entire villages that don't farm anymore. They transport. The local mechanics suddenly know a lot about hidden compartments and quick paint jobs. There's talk of narco planes, small aircraft that land on improvised runways, load up, and vanish before breakfast. Sometimes, the planes are found abandoned in cow pastures, stripped of everything valuable, the ultimate take what you need scenario. The government, of course, sees nothing. Officials issue solemn denials. The president appears on TV denouncing the imperialist smear campaign and insisting that Venezuela is a land of peace, sunshine and arepas, not cocaine. Meanwhile, the media grows quieter, the headlines more cautious. Some reporters go silent, others just start covering the weather. Corruption helps the process glide along. Customs officers develop sudden vision problems. Border patrols look the other way. Police checkpoints wave suspicious trucks through with a smile and a discreet envelope. If you work at the airport, you know better than to ask about the unmarked crates or the hurried special deliveries. Everyone understands the code. Don't get curious, don't get involved, and for heaven's sake, don't ask too many questions. For most people, the changes are subtle, but real. Prices go up on certain things, down on others. Luxury cars show up in towns that haven't seen a paved road in years. Nightclubs get flashier. More and more, you hear about people making it big without anyone being able to explain exactly how. You're told that new jobs have opened up, but nobody wants to discuss the details at family dinner. Travelling becomes an exercise in caution. You learn which roads are best avoided after dark. Gas stations near the border never seem to run out of fuel, but they're also strangely empty. Taxis refuse certain fares. Everybody has a cousin with a story about a bribe, a scare, or a lucky escape. If you see a boat loading after midnight, you keep walking. And yet, despite the secrecy, the new reality is clear to everyone except the officials on television. Venezuela, the oil giant, has become a new kind of hub, a crossroads where drugs, money and silence move faster than news. In the end, you realize that while governments can deny almost anything, geography and economics are much harder to argue with. So you keep your head down, mind your business, and try not to ask why the neighbour's pet parrot just learned to say runway. You hear rumours about military officials involved in trafficking. Investigations stall. Arrests never happen. The lines between state and cartel blur, not dramatically, but administratively. It's the sort of rumour that starts as a joke at the market, then quietly turns serious after a second cup of coffee. Did you hear about the general with the private jet, someone whispers? Or the colonel who built a mansion in Aruba on a captain's salary? You laugh, because in Venezuela the only thing moving faster than inflation is gossip. But as the stories pile up, the punchlines stop being funny. You notice that the country's top brass are suddenly a lot more visible and a lot more prosperous. Their uniforms are always crisp, their watches suspiciously shiny, their vehicles big enough to block half the street. There are rumours of generals who own entire neighbourhoods, of lieutenants who went from guarding border posts to flying business class. When questioned, the answer is always the same. It's all above board. Except, of course, that the board keeps moving. Officially there are laws. There are investigations, commissions, anti-corruption offices with very official-sounding names. Every so often, the government launches a new task force complete with logos and press conferences. But somehow, the big names are never mentioned. Cases stall out in paperwork. Witnesses disappear into a shuffle of reassignments and early retirements. If anyone is arrested, it's always someone low on the totem pole, charged with mismanagement or procedural errors. Never trafficking, never cartel ties. You hear about officers caught with a little too much side business, but a few weeks later they turn up at a different base, wearing new sunglasses and the same old smile. You get used to the grey area, where uniforms blend into civilian clothes and checkpoints look more like toll booths. Soldiers wave trucks through with barely a glance. Official vehicles move at night, headlights off, escorted by motorcycles with no plates. The boundaries between state and cartel aren't marked by gunfire or dramatic shootouts. They're written in ledgers, stamped by rubber seals, and filed in locked drawers. Corruption, you realise, is less a crime than a process. Slow, methodical, and dull enough to lull the country to sleep. It seeps into everyday life. You notice more private security companies popping up, all staffed by off-duty soldiers. The military manages everything from gas stations to shipping containers. Generals appear at ribbon cuttings for new warehouses, smiling for the cameras as journalists ask questions about logistics. There's talk of officers involved in agricultural exports, but nobody asks why the produce is always moving in unmarked trucks at midnight. Conversations get quieter. Friends and family swap stories in low voices, avoiding names and details. The safest opinion is none at all. You learn to nod, to agree that the general is a hard worker, that the military keeps order, that everything is very well organised. You know when to change the subject, usually right after someone mentions narco-sobrinos or the cartel of the Suns. If you're clever, you steer the conversation to baseball or the weather, anything but the increasingly tangled web at the top. The government, for its part, keeps up appearances. There are denials, threats of libel suits, and the occasional dramatic speech about defending the homeland from subversion. But beneath the surface, nothing changes. The lines between who protects and who profits have dissolved. Not loudly, not violently, but with the quiet certainty of bureaucracy at work. And so, daily life goes on. You pass the same checkpoints, see the same faces, hear the same rumours. The country moves forward, slowly, carefully, on a foundation built not on laws or ideals, but on quiet complicity and the unspoken agreement to never look too closely at who exactly is really in charge. Ironically, even oil stops working properly. Refineries break down, production falls, gas shortages appear in the country with the largest reserves on Earth. You wait in line for fuel, confused and exhausted. It's the punchline nobody saw coming. Venezuela, the land where oil once gushed like water from a cracked pipe, suddenly can't keep the gas flowing. At first, it's almost funny. Neighbours joke that you'll run out of fuel before you run out of patience. Then you realise it isn't a joke at all. There you are, sitting in a car that's older than most soap operas, stuck in a line that stretches so far you start recognising the same potholes from previous fuel shortages. The refineries are always under maintenance. Sometimes it's a power issue, sometimes a missing part, sometimes scheduled optimisation, which in practice means someone's cousin promised to fix it last week and then disappeared. Pipelines leak, tanks rust, and engineers who once built miracles now improvise with duct tape and hope. Spare parts are a memory, expertise, a fading rumour. If you ask why, you'll get a different story each day. Sabotage, international conspiracy, bad weather, or maybe just a stubborn flock of birds. You plan your errands around gas availability. Some days the queue for a fill-up is longer than the actual drive to work. People bring thermoses of coffee and folding chairs. Some make new friends. Others invent a new kind of patience, one born from necessity, not choice. You read books, scroll through memes, nap, and listen to the radio cycle through the same 4 songs while the sun rises, peaks, and begins to set. Even the black market adapts. Enterprising souls siphon fuel from mysterious sources, selling it by the litre in battered plastic jugs for prices that would make your grandfather faint. Rumours swirl about secret pipelines, military convoys, and special stations where connections matter more than cash. Some drivers know which attendants to tip, which guards to smile at, and which lines to avoid because they haven't moved since last Tuesday. Meanwhile, public transport limps along on empty tanks and prayers. Buses crawl through city streets, jammed with people and fumes. Motorcycles become a hot commodity, zipping past traffic and parking just about anywhere. You start measuring time in pre-shortage and post-shortage. You remember when a full tank was a basic right, not a luxury or a gamble. Every once in a while the government issues a bold new plan. Next week, fuel will be plentiful. You hear about investments, international deals, new refinery launches. Each promise lands with the weight of last week's bread. The reality is always the same. Another line, another rumour, another day spent wondering if you'll make it home before the gauge hits zero. People get creative. They run errands on foot, dust off old bicycles, carpool with neighbours, or simply stay home. Social life bends to the fuel supply. Weddings, birthdays, even funerals are rescheduled depending on which days the stations are open. The new status symbol isn't a fancy car, but a secret stash of gasoline. It's a national irony so thick you could bottle it. Oil-rich Venezuela, queuing for gas, haggling over litres, watching the pumps sputter and stall. You can almost hear the ghosts of oil executives past muttering, "This wasn't supposed to happen." But here you are, waiting in the world's longest, slowest parade, sandwiched between a broken-down taxi and a truck full of wilted vegetables, wondering what happened to the miracle under your feet. You sigh, inch forward, and tell yourself it can't get much more absurd than this. But deep down, you know, in Venezuela, the punchline always has another twist. You know someone who left, then another, then everyone. Millions flee to neighbouring countries. Families scatter. Brain drain accelerates. Venezuela becomes a place people escape rather than plan for. At first, it's a trickle. A neighbour's daughter goes to Colombia just for a job. Your cousin's best friend flies to Panama. The mechanic down the block sends money from Peru, and suddenly his house is empty except for a sun-bleached hammock and a dog that still barks at the gate every evening. The stories come in fragments. A WhatsApp message at midnight, a phone call from a foreign area code, a picture of someone you haven't seen in months grinning in a supermarket aisle full of things you haven't seen in years. Then the trickle becomes a flood. Every day someone else is packing bags, selling what's left of their furniture, and making promises they don't quite believe. I'll come back, just for a year, just until things get better. Grandparents wave from doorsteps, trying not to look too sad. Children hug their friends a little tighter on the last day of school, exchanging email addresses, Instagram handles, anything to hold on. Even the street vendors talk about friends who crossed the border, on foot, by bus, with all their hopes stuffed into a backpack and a pair of sturdy shoes. You start to measure time in departures. That was the year Maria left for Ecuador, or, after Juan went to Chile, we stopped celebrating Christmas as a whole family. There's a new kind of silence in the neighbourhood, the hush of empty apartments and shuttered shops. You see it in every long line for passports, in the packed bus stations, in the way people memorize bus schedules to Cúcuta, Lima, Quito, São Paulo. Those who stay behind become experts at waiting and worrying. You keep your phone close, watching for messages from relatives abroad. A video call from a noisy room, a rushed greeting from a border checkpoint, a text that just says, "We made it." If you're lucky, they send money, tiny lifelines wired across continents, arriving as dollars, as groceries, as shoes for a growing child. The people who leave take their skills, their energy, their ambition. Teachers, engineers, doctors, mechanics. You notice the local clinic closes early now. The school runs out of math teachers. The bakery never quite gets the bread to rise the way it used to. The brain drain isn't just an economist phrase, it's a daily reality. Every goodbye is a little quieter, every empty chair at dinner another reminder that home is shrinking. Yet, in some ways, life adapts. New communities form abroad, clusters of Venezuelans rebuilding family dinners in Buenos Aires, playing baseball in Bogotá, running arepa stalls in Madrid. Your Facebook feed fills with snapshots of their new lives. Kids in school uniforms, birthday parties, summer picnics, all against a backdrop of unfamiliar buildings and strange weather. Some thrive, some struggle. All keep a piece of home tucked away, an old recipe, a faded flag, a habit of talking too loudly at family gatherings. You don't stop hoping. People still dream of coming back, still talk about when this is all over. Suitcases never get thrown away, just stored. just in case. And every return visit, rare as rain in the dry season, is a celebration of survival. Laughter, tears, stories swapped over coffee, the bittersweet joy of reunion. But underneath it all, you know what's changed. Venezuela, once a place people came to for opportunity, is now a place people leave to find it. You hold on to memories, to phone calls, to the idea of someday. And in the quiet after each goodbye, you realize the most Venezuelan skill of all is learning to say farewell again and again without ever really letting go. International sanctions arrive. The government blames everything on them. Some problems worsen, others were already there. The economy becomes more isolated, more desperate and more dependent on informal networks. It starts, as these things often do, with a headline and a speech. The president appears on television, a national flag behind him, and solemnly explains that a new round of sanctions is coming. External aggression, he calls it, imperialist sabotage. The ministers nod on cue. The blame game is official, and it has perfect timing, just when it's clear that the old explanations for shortages and economic chaos are wearing thin. You listen, half watching, half scrolling through your phone, and you already know what comes next. New rules, more controls. News anchors read out fresh lists of banned imports, forbidden bank accounts, suspended flights. Life, always tricky, now feels like a series of closed doors and invisible walls. If it's hard to find medicine, it's because of the sanctions. If flour or gasoline vanish, sanctions again. Even the daily blackout gets a mention. Cyber warfare, the government insists. Unrelenting attacks on the homeland's infrastructure. You almost admire the creativity. But there's a catch. Everyone remembers how things were before the sanctions, and they weren't exactly smooth sailing. Empty supermarket shelves, endless lines for everything, runaway prices, these were already your reality. What the sanctions really do is tighten an already suffocating knot. Importers vanish. Spare parts for cars and factories dry up. Dollars become even harder to get. Bank transfers freeze. Foreign cards stop working. And international shopping becomes something you only read about in novels. You watch as the country turns inward. Whatever can't be grown, built, or cobbled together inside the border becomes a rare and precious thing. If you want a simple medicine, you ask friends, friends of friends, maybe an uncle in Miami. If you need a car part, it might come smuggled inside a suitcase, or not at all. The formal economy, the one with receipts and guarantees, shrinks to a shadow. The real action moves to the informal networks, those intricate webs of trust, rumour and negotiation that have always run in the background. Everyone has a guy. There's a guy for cheese, a guy for antibiotics, a guy for US dollars. WhatsApp groups multiply. Family chats light up with alerts about who has cooking oil, where eggs have turned up, or which supermarket got a secret shipment of pasta. Barter returns in style. Rice for soap, motor oil for laundry detergent, a birthday cake for a haircut. Business hours are fluid, inventory a mystery, and price lists a fantasy. The government, meanwhile, doubles down on the narrative. Every speech includes a catalogue of enemies, every poster a heroic slogan about resistance. Sometimes you wonder if the Ministry of Propaganda is the only thing getting regular shipments of ink and paper, but on the street people roll their eyes, adjust, and keep hustling. Blame can only fill your stomach for so long. Ironically, the more the economy is isolated, the more creative people become. A new kind of resilience flourishes: improvisation, workarounds, solidarity. Networks replace systems. If the banks are frozen, someone starts an informal money transfer business. If official supplies dry up, homemade solutions step in. Every block has its own supply chain. The formal world shrinks. The informal one thrives. And so you learn to live in a country where the official version and reality drift further apart, held together by jokes, stubbornness, and WhatsApp groups that run 24 hours a day. Problems grow, blame is assigned, but the real work, survival, continues quietly, outside the spotlight, in lines, kitchens, living rooms, and street corners, far from the speeches and sanctions. Your goals shrink. You don't plan careers anymore. You plan meals. You trade, barter, and improvise. Life becomes about navigating shortages, not building futures. You notice it one morning when you're making coffee. The big dreams are gone. You're not imagining yourself running a company, publishing a novel, or even finishing that online degree. Instead, you're wondering if there will be enough sugar for tomorrow. Ambition quietly packs its bags and leaves in the night, replaced by a new obsession: survival. If you have a 5-year plan, it's just a list of foods you hope to see again before you die. There's a daily rhythm to this new way of living. You wake up and check your phone, not for emails or opportunities, but for rumours. What's available today? Where are the eggs? Who's heard about a shipment of toilet paper? Success isn't a promotion. It's getting to the store before everyone else. If you find a chicken, you call your mother, your cousins, maybe your old neighbour from 3 apartments ago. Good news travels fast. So does soap. You become an expert at making do. Flour is a luxury, so you learn a dozen ways to cook without it. If there's no milk, you improvise with water or hope that condense can still be found. Rice is your new best friend, appearing in breakfast, lunch, dinner, and, if you get creative, dessert. Every old family recipe is rewritten to accommodate whatever's actually available. You Google things like how to make cheese out of a hope and disappointment. The old skills become valuable again. Fixing a leaky faucet, making shoes last 1 more year, sewing buttons onto shirts you swore you'd never wear again. Suddenly everyone's a mechanic, a cook, a gardener. If you can fix a blender with a hairpin, you're a local hero. Barter isn't just for the flea market anymore. It's the backbone of daily life. You swap soap for beans, pasta for aspirin, a haircut for a couple of eggs. Children learn the art of negotiation before multiplication. Neighbourhoods organise swap meets, where people trade what they have for what they need. The currency is trust, favours, and the unspoken agreement that nobody ever trades for less than 2 rolls of toilet paper. Careers are something you read about in magazines left behind at the doctor's office. That degree on your wall, it's just a nice piece of paper now. The real resume is a mental list of skills. Can you grow tomatoes on a balcony, fix a generator, navigate 3 bus transfers and a blackout? Congratulations, you're overqualified for life in the new Venezuela. Socializing changes too. Parties are smaller, simpler, sometimes powered by candles and cans of tuna. People gather not to show off but to share. Food, news, advice, a little borrowed hope. You talk about the old days, when travel was possible, when jobs meant something, when the future felt like an open road instead of a maze. And yet, there's a stubborn pride in getting through the week. You find yourself laughing at absurdities. You celebrate small victories. A cake baked from scratch, a neighbour who fixed the Wi-Fi, a relative who smuggled in shampoo. Resourcefulness replaces ambition, and while you might miss the dreams you used to have, you take real satisfaction in simply making it work. Life becomes about the present, about what you can do today to get through until tomorrow. You build routines, relationships, and backup plans. You learn to expect little, appreciate much, and, if you're lucky, to laugh at the difference. And if you ever wonder what happened to your big ambitions, you look around and realise, surviving this long with this much creativity might just be its own kind of success. Ironically, illegal trade works better than legal systems. Cartels provide jobs, logistics, and structure. They don't advertise it, but they fill gaps the state can't. You never thought you'd see the day when the most reliable business in town was run by people who never print receipts. But here you are, living in a place where the black market isn't just a part of life. It's the only part that actually works. The legal system wheezes along, delayed by missing forms and empty offices, but the drug economy hums with the quiet efficiency of a Swiss watch, if that watch was made out of cash, connections, and plausible deniability. It starts small. Maybe you notice a neighbour's son driving a shiny new motorbike. Maybe the local bakery is suddenly flush with imported flour, even though the supermarket hasn't seen a delivery truck in months. There are whispers, always, about who's working for the business, but nobody ever says the word cartel above a whisper. Why would you? It's not polite, and in Venezuela, good manners can be a matter of survival. Jobs are scarce. Factories close, government offices only pay in promises, and the official employment line is longer than a gas queue in Maracaibo. But the cartels are hiring. They don't put up signs or run recruitment drives. They simply let the word spread. If you can drive, carry or count, you're in. Logistics, transport, security, communications, it's a parallel economy that doesn't bother with tax forms or HR. No one gives you a pension, but at least you get paid on time. There's a strange professionalism to it. The state spends years designing systems that collapse on a rainy Tuesday. The cartels build networks that stretch across borders, moving goods and people with the precision of a military drill. Shipments don't get lost. Packages don't go missing. If someone messes up, they hear about it quickly, directly, and with a clarity HR managers could only dream of. There are rules, just not the ones you learned in civics class. Everyone adapts. Some run errands. Others lend their houses for storage. A few get pulled in deeper, working jobs that officially don't exist. The unofficial economy is flexible. Bribes replace receipts, handshakes replace contracts, and everyone learns not to ask too many questions about where the trucks are going at midnight. If the legal system is a maze, the cartel's version is a straight line. Do your job, don't talk, get paid. The drug trade even fills in for the welfare state. When the government can't provide, someone else does. Need medicine? Someone knows a guy. Need dollars? There's a back room for that. If you get robbed, the local gang might get your stuff back faster than the police, if you're polite, if you pay the recovery fee. The government makes speeches about law and order. The cartels just get things done. It isn't all power and glamour, of course. There's risk, there's fear, there are stories that end badly. But the strange truth is that in a broken system, stability, even the illegal kind, feels like a lifeline. The people who work these jobs don't brag. They don't need to. The evidence is in who can buy groceries, pay for school supplies, or fix a leaky roof. You might wish it were different. You might remember a time when the state was strong and the laws meant something. But for now, the lines between legal and illegal blur until nobody cares to sort them out. You wake up, you do what you have to, and you keep your head down. In Venezuela, the cartels aren't just filling a void. They're the only ones who remembered to show up for work. Money from abroad keeps families alive. Dollars replace bolivars. Informal economies thrive. The official system exists mostly on paper. It starts with a phone call from a cousin in Peru, maybe a Western Union receipt, or a surprise text from Miami. At first, it feels like a bonus, some extra cash for groceries, a treat for the kids, the means to fix that leaky roof before the rainy season starts. But slowly, quietly, remittances from abroad become less of a lifeline and more like the main artery. Venezuela's economy doesn't so much run as it limps along, propped up by the hard-earned dollars of relatives scattered across 3 continents. You get used to the rhythm. Every month, like clockwork, a message, check your account. Or for those who prefer things old school, a brown envelope tucked into a bus seat, or a bundle of greenbacks passed discreetly in a crowded market. Your sister in Ecuador, your uncle in Chile, your friend in Madrid, they're all part of the invisible network that keeps your refrigerator humming and your children in shoes. At the bank you wait in line with everyone else, holding your breath that the transfer went through. If you're lucky, the teller slips you crisp bills, US dollars, because nobody trusts the Bolivar anymore, not even the government. Shops list prices in dollar efectivo, or dollar zel. The only people still quoting prices in Bolivars are the ones who haven't updated their menu since last month, or maybe just enjoy a good joke. The economy you knew, the one with paychecks, invoices and ledgers, is mostly a fiction. The real action is informal. WhatsApp groups announcing who's selling cooking oil this week, neighbourhood barter fairs, people trading flour for medicine or soap for batteries. Street vendors are back in force, and their calculators convert everything to dollars before you finish saying buenos dias. The official exchange rate is a fantasy. The black market rate is the one that matters, passed hand to hand like the secret to making perfect arepas. Families organise around remittances. You have a spreadsheet not for your savings, but for tracking which relative is sending money, how much and when. Some cousins chip in for birthdays, others cover emergencies, school supplies or medicine. Family reunions are less about who can come home and more about who can send a package, a wire or a phone recharge. It's international teamwork, with the family chat as mission control. You adjust to the new rules. Kids know more about Western Union than about fairy tales. Grandparents learn how to scan receipts on a smartphone, or at least how to ask someone else to do it. If you need something big, a refrigerator, a bicycle, a laptop, it goes on the group wish list, and everyone abroad chips in a little. Patience isn't just a virtue, it's a currency. A new washing machine might take 6 months of careful planning, but eventually it arrives, sometimes with a friend, sometimes in 3 pieces, sometimes with a letter tucked inside. Meanwhile, the official economy becomes increasingly surreal. The state still prints bolivars, makes announcements, and signs agreements. But salaries are worth less than a cup of instant coffee, and government plans have the lifespan of a ripe banana. Public servants moonlight as delivery drivers, teachers take up hairstyling, and professionals of all kinds become experts at side hustles and currency exchange apps. If you step back and squint, the entire country looks like a giant group project, millions of people making it work through improvisation, solidarity, and the sheer stubbornness of not giving up. Remittances aren't just money, they're proof that family, even scattered across the globe, can keep each other afloat. And so, life continues, not on the strength of the economy, but on the resilience of people. Venezuela officially runs on paper. In reality, it runs on WhatsApp, dollars, and the hope that next month another envelope will arrive, and another day can be faced with a little less worry. You look back and realise Venezuela didn't fall overnight. It slid slowly, comfortably, confidently, powered by oil, sustained by denial, and undone by the belief that money without limits meant consequences without limits too. It's easy to blame one thing, one leader, one moment. But when you trace the story back, it's never just a single disaster. The roots are tangled, a country gifted with unimaginable wealth buried under its feet, a people told for generations that black gold would last forever. Oil was supposed to be the answer, and for a while, it was. It built the cities, the highways, the endless parade of government projects and sparkling shopping malls. It paid for scholarships, highways, and social programs with the casual ease of a lottery winner on a spree. You remember the old TV ads, shiny cars, bustling airports, skyscrapers shimmering in the valley sun. Caracas wanted to be Miami, maybe even Paris. Everyone had a story about a relative who worked for PDVSA or got a new refrigerator from the government. The country felt invincible, cushioned by barrels of crude and the world's unquenchable thirst for oil. Even during rough years, there was always the next price boom, the next loan, the next president with a plan to spend just a little more. But as time went on, the habit stuck. When oil prices dipped, nobody tightened their belts. The government borrowed. When they rose, nobody saved. Denial became policy. The illusion held as long as the money did. Few asked what would happen if the wells ran dry or the price tanked, because that would have meant preparing for a future that looked less generous than the present. Instead, the country doubled down on oil, on spending, on the myth that someone else, somewhere, would always pick up the tab. Then, when the oil money started to sputter, cracks showed everywhere. Schools that looked modern on paper couldn't afford chalk. Hospitals lost power. Streets filled with potholes. The middle class, once confident and expanding, watched savings evaporate and dreams shrink. The government blamed enemies, the past, the future, anyone but the math. Hyperinflation turned money into tissue paper, and those who could leave, left. Those who stayed learned to hustle, improvise, and rely on each other in ways no official program could teach. You think about how easy it is to ignore warning signs when things are good. How comfortable denial feels when the bills are paid and the lights are on. How slow the slide can be. Years of small decisions, each one sensible in the moment, adding up to a future nobody meant to build. Oil didn't just shape the economy. It shaped the culture, the politics, even the national character. There was always the idea that just around the corner, another bonanza waited, another chance to start over, to forgive the debts, to build something dazzling. But no windfall lasts forever. When the tide went out, the truth was hard to miss. The systems weren't designed to survive without the thing that made them possible in the first place. Yet even now, as you sit with neighbours, share a meal made from what's available, and tell stories about the old days, you realise that people still find ways to laugh, to hope, to dream, if more carefully than before. There's resilience here, and a quiet wisdom born from hard lessons. The oil built Venezuela's greatest moments, and its hardest ones too. Looking back, you see that the slide wasn't a single fall, but 1,000 little slips. Oil gave the country everything but caution, and took away almost every reason to learn it. In the end, it wasn't the price of oil that undid Venezuela. It was the belief that wealth without limits meant a future without consequences. And as you drift off, you wonder what stories the next generation will tell about oil, about hope, and about learning. Finally, to build something that lasts. You stop trusting the official currency entirely. Bolivar has moved too fast to be useful, so you start thinking in dollars, real ones, folded, hidden, whispered about. People stash them in books, shoes, walls, inside rice bags. The mattress becomes a bank. The bank becomes a joke. And quietly, without a law being passed, the country unofficially dollarizes itself because survival doesn't wait for policy approval. It's not just you, everyone's doing it. You learn to spot the subtle movements. A neighbour slipping a crisp bill into a dog-eared copy of Don Quixote, an aunt sewing a secret pouch into her pillowcase, an old man tucking 5 wrinkled Washingtons into the lining of his shoe. Nobody advertises it, but somehow everyone's heard the same advice. If you want your money to last longer than your groceries, it had better be in dollars. The local joke is that mattresses are the new banks, and at least your savings won't vanish in the night unless your cat develops expensive tastes. Officially, nothing changes. Government ministers keep telling you to trust the believer. New bills are printed, zeros are lopped off, slogans are recited, but nobody's fooled. You check the exchange rate each morning, and by lunchtime, you wish you'd checked it twice. Friends trade tips on the best apps for calculating the real value of the believer, but the only app that matters is whichever one connects you to a cousin in Miami with spare singles. Transactions become a quiet performance. In the market, you hear it in code. Do you accept efectivo? Can I pay in green? How much for cash? How much for transfer? You grow adept at folding bills so small they slip into socks, bras, cell phone cases. The most popular household chore isn't cleaning or cooking, it's finding a new place to hide the dollars. The phrase under the mattress isn't a metaphor anymore, it's a lifestyle. Stores adapt too. Price tags now list 2, sometimes 3 numbers. The believer price for the deluded, the dollar price for the prepared, and sometimes an exchange rate that makes you wonder if math is just another form of fiction. Restaurants accept dollar Zelle and dollar effectivo. You half expect the baker to offer buy one loaf, get $1 out of circulation free. Every cashier has a favourite bill-checking pen, and nobody blinks if you pass over a 20 with a little extra mileage. Children, of course, catch on fast. They stop playing with toy money and start asking for change in dollars. Piggy banks become little green vaults. Teens can recite 3 different exchange rates by memory, but nobody can remember what a believer was supposed to be worth back in the day. Birthday gifts, wedding presents, even raffle prizes at school fairs all come with a wink and a folded George Washington. As the country quietly dollarizes, the government protests loudly, officially but uselessly. The law says one thing, survival says another. Employers pay bonuses in dollars, rent is negotiated in dollars, some doctors accept payment in cash only. Legal and practical part ways, and you learn that peace of mind comes in denominations of 1, 5, 10, and 20. Some people get creative, hiding bills in bags of flour, in old VHS tapes, even inside the base of the blender that hasn't worked since 2004. You know at least one person who keeps their life savings tucked into a jar of rice just in case. Security means never having all your eggs, or dollars, in one basket. You realize after a while that the whole country has slipped into a parallel reality. The bank is now the last place you trust with your money. The mattress is king, and the only real interest rate is the one you charge yourself for not losing sleep over tomorrow's exchange rate. In a world where currencies crumble and paychecks turn to dust, survival is a crisp green bill you can fold, hide, and count again tomorrow. Let's talk about how things actually get done. Nothing works officially, so everything works unofficially. You pay doctors in cash, mechanics in favours, and neighbours in eggs. Permits, licenses and rules still exist technically, but they've become more like suggestions. The real economy runs on trust, timing, and knowing the right cousin. You wake up and realise that every day is bring your own solution day. The official world is a museum, open, dusty, occasionally interesting, but not really useful for everyday life. You need to get a birth certificate. You know a guy at the civil registry, and you bring him a loaf of fresh bread, not because you're bribing him, but because you're polite and it helps him remember you when the printer works. Want a doctor's appointment? You don't call the clinic, you message your neighbour's uncle, who sees patients in his living room and will accept payment in dollars, cash, or, on rare occasions, a decent bottle of rum. This is the world of the informal economy, where everything is negotiable and nothing is guaranteed. You need your shoes fixed. The cobbler on the corner will do it, as long as you have cash, or can trade a bag of rice. If your car breaks down, you find a mechanic with a working set of tools, and good luck with that. Then pay him in a mix of dollars and spare parts. Nobody expects receipts. If you ask for one, they'll laugh and offer you a piece of cardboard to write your own. Shopping feels like being on a scavenger hunt where the rules change daily. Stores sometimes stock the basics, but the real finds are hidden in informal markets and word-of-mouth exchanges. There's a secret network of WhatsApp groups where people post what they have and what they want. Flour for aspirin, gasoline for diapers, eggs for a haircut. You don't just buy things, you barter, swap, and promise to return the favour. Everyone's an entrepreneur, whether they want to be or not. If you're good at baking, you make cakes for your neighbours' birthdays and get paid in groceries or favours. If you know how to fix cell phones, you're never out of work or rice. The line between friend and client blurs. The neighbour who once borrowed sugar is now your preferred source for imported shampoo smuggled across the border by her cousin's friend's boyfriend. permits and licenses. They exist theoretically in a drawer somewhere, but nobody checks. If you do need a real stamp, you find the right cousin or pay a little speed fee. Rules become more like community guidelines, flexible, occasionally enforced but mostly ignored if you don't cause trouble. Trust is the actual currency. You know who's reliable, who delivers, who's a little flaky but always tries. Your network is everything. Forget business cards, your phone is full of contacts listed as Luis, eggs, Anna, medicine, Jorge, good mechanic. Timing is an art. Call too early and you seem desperate. Too late and the deal's gone. You learn to say mañana with the right mixture of hope and resignation. Even entertainment adapts. Movie nights are organized with borrowed projectors. Parties are potluck by necessity. You might get invited to a barbecue and leave with half a bag of flour in exchange for bringing the sodas. In the end, you realize that the informal economy is less a workaround and more a way of life. A system that runs on human connection, flexibility, and the refusal to give up, no matter how many official systems have given out. Here, you survive not by following the rules, but by knowing who actually makes things happen. And you can't help but admire it, even as you sigh and wish, just for a second, that you could pay your bills with a debit card and a little faith in the system. But in Venezuela, you've learned that real value is measured not in numbers on a screen, but in favors returned, problems solved, and the right cousin always on speed dial. Every night the television insists everything is fine. Charts appear. Speeches repeat. You listen while standing in line for bread, wondering if you're in the wrong timeline. The disconnect grows wider between what's said and what's lived. You learn to treat announcements like weather forecasts from someone indoors. It's a ritual now. After dinner you flip on the TV, half out of habit, half out of hope. There's the president, larger than life, flanked by officials nodding at just the right moments, waving at invisible crowds. He announces that prosperity is just around the corner, that imports are up, exports are up, morale is up. Everything, apparently, is up, except the bread rising in your kitchen and your mood after a day spent hunting for milk. Charts pop up, labelled with impressive numbers and optimistic colours. There's a line climbing ever higher, meant to symbolise economic growth, or wheat production, or possibly the number of times someone's been told to do está bien. If you squint, you can almost see the details, but most of the chart is just arrows and the occasional smiley face, as if PowerPoint could fill empty shelves. Announcements are made with the confidence of a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat, except sometimes the hat is empty, and the magician shrugs, promising next time there will be 2 rabbits. You listen as ministers roll out new plans, subsidies, reforms, missions, their faces earnest, their suits slightly too shiny under studio lights. You've heard it all before, and so has everyone else in your apartment building. The speeches are background noise, the soundtrack to a life where the only thing delivered on time is another explanation. Meanwhile, outside your window, the reality show is a little less scripted. You stand in line, trading jokes with strangers, checking your phone for updates from friends about which supermarket actually has cooking oil. The disconnect is so glaring it becomes comic relief. While the president promises a new shipment of chicken to every neighbourhood, you count 4, maybe 5, chickens in your entire borough. 2 are pets, 1 is a rumour, and 1 belongs to the butcher, who guards it like a national treasure. Over time, you develop a 6th sense for TV announcements. If the government says gasoline will be plentiful tomorrow, you know to get in line tonight. If a minister guarantees a new batch of medicines at local clinics, you call your cousin in Bogota for a care package. If a new economic miracle is unveiled, you brace for more lines, more confusion, and maybe a surprise blackout for extra effect. Everyone adapts. Your neighbour runs a running commentary during the news, rating each promise with a raised eyebrow or a snort. The kids learn to mimic the officials, inventing their own state television games where the rules change every time someone new picks up the remote. Even the cat seemed skeptical, watching the flickering images with the kind of unimpressed stare reserved for failed magic tricks and empty food bowls. Some people turn off the TV for good, choosing music, podcasts, or the sound of rain on the tin roof. Others keep watching, half believing, half for the comedy. The lines between information, entertainment, and wishful thinking blur until they're indistinguishable. You stop arguing with the TV and start arguing with the toaster, which at least delivers results occasionally. The official story continues, upbeat, unwavering, stubbornly detached from the taste of stale bread and long walks to the market. You learn to survive on rumour, improvisation, and the unofficial network that's grown up in the spaces left behind by failed promises. The government still shows up on TV, smiling and announcing a brighter tomorrow. But you and everyone else standing in line know that real news comes from neighbours, cousins, and the weather outside, not from the magical land behind the screen. And so, you treat each new proclamation like a forecast from someone who's never left their air-conditioned office. Interesting perhaps, but never quite enough to leave your umbrella at home. You notice the kids. They understand inflation before multiplication. They know which stores have food, which day's water comes, and how to wait. Childhood adapts. Games change. Dreams get smaller, then sharper. Survival becomes a skill taught early, quietly, without ceremony. It starts with the little things. You hear the kids in the hallway, swapping stories about what a loaf of bread costs today versus last week. They talk about the best supermarkets for rice, and which cashiers will let you buy an extra bag of flour if you smile and ask nicely. You realise that they've become experts in economics by accident. Inflation is a word they use in jokes, not yet realising that adults are only pretending to laugh. Their schedules are marked not by school bells or television shows, but by water deliveries and power outages. They know, better than you do, that Tuesday is a good day for a shower, and that Friday is the day to fill every bucket in the house. They play find the light, darting around to whichever room has electricity, inventing games in the glow of battery lanterns and cell phones plugged in at a neighbour's house. Waiting becomes their extracurricular activity. The patience of a Venezuelan child is legendary. Hours spent in lines for groceries, with only a snack and a game of I Spy to pass the time. They swap tricks for making waiting fun, counting dogs on the street, spotting funny hats, pretending they're secret agents on a mission to find flour. You see them giggle in the supermarket, weaving around the legs of adults, always alert for the signal to move up in line or grab something quickly off the shelf. Their play adapts too. Instead of collecting trading cards or video games, they collect bottle caps and rubber bands, turning trash into treasures, boredom into creativity. Soccer is still king, but now it's played with makeshift balls and barefoot teams on cracked pavement. Hide and seek is played around blackout schedules. When birthdays come around, the best present is sometimes a piece of imported chocolate, split carefully among siblings and friends. Dreams shift. The classic answers to "what do you want to be when you grow up?" get an update. Doctor and teacher are still there, but now you also hear "I want to go abroad," "I want to have dollars," or "I want to help my family." Their goals get sharper, focused on leaving, earning, surviving. Some dream of becoming YouTubers, not for fame, but for the chance to send money home, to buy a real cake for someone's birthday, to be the cousin who comes back for Christmas with a suitcase full of presents. You see how early they start learning responsibility. Older siblings walk younger ones to school or take care of the house during endless water shortages. They help ration food, plan meals, and remember which store has the best barter rates. They know how to negotiate with adults and charm a tired neighbour into sharing a little more. The playground is their first lesson in diplomacy, the grocery line in patience, the power outage in resilience. Childhood isn't lost, it just looks different. There's laughter, yes, and the same wild energy you remember from your own youth. But there's also a seriousness beneath it, a wisdom earned the hard way. You watch them and feel both pride and sadness, pride in their grit, sadness that they need it so soon. At night, as you tuck them into bed, you see them clutching not just stuffed animals, but the day's small victories, a full stomach, a joke well timed, the promise that tomorrow somehow there will be enough. Survival becomes the first skill learned and the last lesson forgotten, taught in silence and sealed with a kiss goodnight. And in that quiet you hope that someday childhood will return to being just that, ordinary, messy, and full of nothing but possibility. Despite everything, life continues. Birthdays happen, music plays, jokes survive. You laugh because laughing is cheap and still legal. Families adapt, communities adjust, and people keep showing up for each other in small, stubborn ways. The system may be broken, but the people are still there, tired, clever, and impossible to fully erase. The calendar doesn't stop turning, no matter how many shortages stack up or how unpredictable the future feels. You notice it every time a neighbour strings up balloons for a birthday, improvising a cake from cornmeal and powdered chocolate, sticking candles into whatever is available, plantains, bread, even an old muffin if that's what you have. The kids sing, the adults clap, and for a moment the world shrinks down to the light of a single flame and the warmth of voices in harmony. Music is everywhere. It seeps through cracked windows, spills out of battered radios, and erupts from impromptu dance parties on balconies and street corners. Someone always has a speaker, someone else a playlist, and when the power goes out, hands turn to drums and voices become instruments. You dance because it feels defiant, a reminder that you're alive and moving even when everything else feels stuck. Merengue, salsa, reggaeton, each song a stubborn act of joy. Jokes become currency. You hear them in supermarket lines, at bus stops, whispered during long waits for water or electricity. Sometimes they're sharp, sometimes gentle, always necessary. Someone cracks wise about inflation. At this rate, my wallet is losing weight faster than I am. You laugh together, and for a moment the line feels shorter, the weight a little lighter. Humour becomes a shield, a language, a lifeline. If you can still laugh, you tell yourself, things can't be all bad. Families become expert contortionists, bending and stretching to fit new realities. Parents swap work shifts to cover for each other. Siblings move back in together. Grandparents become childcare gurus and amateur chefs. Meals are shared, duties divided, and even the simplest dinner becomes a small feast when everyone is at the table. The family group chat is never silent, a constant thread of memes, voice notes, emergency shopping tips, and old photos of better times. You plan together, worry together, improvise together, always finding new ways to make ends meet. Communities grow closer, neighbours trade what they have, rice for oil, stories for comfort, a ride on a motorcycle for a dozen eggs. You know who has medicine, who knows a mechanic who can fix a generator. Networks sprout up, fueled not by profit but by mutual stubbornness and an unspoken agreement that nobody gets left behind if it can be helped. During storms or blackouts, someone checks on the elderly. During festivals, even the smallest neighbourhood finds a way to celebrate. You learn that resilience is built, not born, and that it looks a lot like borrowed sugar and a shoulder to cry on. In the evenings, you gather with friends and family, sitting outside to catch a breeze and share a laugh. Kids run barefoot through the dust, playing games with rules they invent on the spot. Adults gossip, dream, reminisce, and occasionally make plans that might never happen. But dreaming is half the fun. You look around and realise that, despite everything, the world is full of quiet, stubborn hope. The government's promises may have faded, the institutions may have cracked, but the things that hold you together are older and deeper than any law or policy. You survive not by waiting for someone to save you, but by saving each other day after day. You keep moving, keep helping, keep finding new ways to turn hardship into humor, scarcity into solidarity, and chaos into community. In the end, what still holds together is what always did. Family, friends, laughter, music, and the quiet determination to endure. Against all odds, you're still here, tired, clever, and impossible to erase. Tonight you've made it through decades of boom and collapse, hope and improvisation, promises and consequences. You woke up in a country overflowing with oil wealth, watched it swell with confidence, and then slowly unravel under the weight of its own certainty. You stood in long lines, counted money that refused to stay valuable, learned to trade favors instead of futures, and discovered that survival is often quieter and more patient than panic. And yet, what lingers isn't just the hardship, it's the resilience, the way people adapted when systems failed, the way families reorganized life around shortages, the way humor survived inflation, blackouts, and speeches that didn't match reality. You saw how neighbors became networks, how communities replaced institutions, and how stubborn human creativity filled the gaps left behind by politics and economics. It's easy to look at a story like this and focus on what went wrong, but it's just as important to notice what didn't disappear. People kept cooking, kept sharing, kept laughing at the absurdity of waiting in line in an oil-rich country for gasoline. They kept finding ways to protect children, care for elders, and make tomorrow feel possible, even when the numbers said otherwise. So tonight, as you sink into your bed with stable electricity, clean water, and money that will probably still be worth something in the morning, maybe take a quiet second to appreciate that. Not out of guilt, just awareness. Because history isn't just a warning, it's proof that people are adaptable, resourceful, and oddly calm in the face of chaos. And as the fan hums, the lights stay on, and your breathing slows, remember this. Systems rise and fall, currencies inflate and vanish, but people endure. Slowly, quietly, one day at a time. Get some rest.